And I think I'll start the Star Spangled Banner. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. Okay.
All right, so welcome everybody to LIMBA. My name is Julie Lutz. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Eastern Suffolk BOCES, a member of the LIMBA board, and I am very excited to be here this morning to co-host this meeting where we have Dr. John Nader, President of Farmingdale State College, as the speaker. John and I had the opportunity to chat a little bit earlier this week. And as I reviewed, so John has been at Farmingdale a little over 5 years, started there in July of 2016, and actually spoke at a LIMBA meeting shortly after he started. Some research would say that it takes about 5 years for people to kind of hit their peak in a position, and John certainly has accomplished a tremendous amount at Farmingdale in the 5 years that he's been there, but he also has a very interesting pathway to the presidency of a 4-year institution. Prior to that, he was the provost at SUNY Delhi. Prior to that, mayor of Oneonta. He was a county legislator, community action leader. He has a BA in politics from Ithaca College, an MA and PhD in economics. Both of those things, a little unusual in the educational field as far as leadership of an institution, but I think that pathway really speaks to what he's been able to accomplish at Farmingdale, including the adoption of a new strategic plan and a mission statement, setting Farmingdale apart as having the highest enrollment growth in the SUNY system over the past several years. More than 100 new faculty and staff members have been hired. As a result of that growth, Dr. Nader meets regularly with state legislators and civic groups to advocate for a new $50 million applied science building. There's also been a lot of renovations on the campus to really bring it up to where it needs to be to provide the type of education that happens at Farmingdale. And in addition, Dr. Nader has taken steps to deepen the college's engagement with campus constituencies and the broader community. There's a partnership with the Long Island Association. In partnership with that, he's completed a major economic impact statement. He hosts an annual legislative breakfast for leaders across Long Island and regularly sponsors civic and business group meetings. He is a member of the Long Island Regional Economic Development Council and serves as co-chair of its Workforce and Education Committee. As this business organization knows, not only higher education, but K-12 education is an economic driver. And as the Chief Operating Officer of a K-12 education and the legislative chair of the Suffolk County School Superintendents, where my focus really is guiding public education, not only from a funding point of view, but from an outcomes point of view. Our connection, the K-12 connection to higher education is critical, right? Because education doesn't start at the 13th or at the 14th year. It starts when a child is 3, 4, or 5. And, there's been a lot of conversations over the years to figure out how do we make sure that that pathway to being a productive, independent adult doesn't have any gaps in it. And I, really enjoyed my chat with John earlier this week. Really excited about hearing from you, John, what's going on at Farmingdale, and, then opening it up to some questions. So turning the floor over to you.
Thank you very much, Julie, and thank you everyone for being with us. I saw someone posted in the chat the question that I know a number of you have, where is Mr. Ernie? He did advise me that he wouldn't be here, all is well. So I wanted to address that question up front. And I know we all thank Ernie for all of the work that he's done with LIMBA and in the region over a number of years. Let me start by talking about the future. And then there's some other topics that I'd like to talk about here. Farmingdale and many other colleges and universities are really focused on what the higher education environment of the years ahead are going to entail. And we will all face on Long Island, but certainly in New York State as a whole, a situation in which there'll be a leveling out, or in many regions, a decline in the number of students leaving our high schools and prepared to go on to college. The demographic numbers are very clear along those lines. Here at Farmingdale, we have been anticipating that. Certainly other institutions have as well. We would like to strengthen our relationship with the 2 community colleges here on Long Island. We do rely on those 2 institutions, Suffolk County Community College and Nassau Community College, for hundreds of students each year. And we even have joint admissions agreements in place with both of those colleges. We're also expanding our outreach to high schools. We have reinvested in our enrollment function and will be even expanding our presence in working with high schools in the area. But we're also trying to work a bit more with non-traditional populations. And I say that guardedly, but this summer, Farmingdale and Stony Brook really began to deliver the first programs in the offshore wind area that we all hear so much about here on Long Island. At Farmingdale, we did a non-credit course for a couple of dozen students. Some of us came to us from our own Long Island Educational Opportunity Centers. We did a credit-bearing course for our own students as part of our wind turbine technician certificate. We did a program with General Electric, delivered in part here at Farmingdale and in part at GE's Alternative Energy Learning Center in the Schenectady, New York area, and had 2 cohorts of just under 20 students each doing that. All by way of saying that we are trying to move into fields that we believe will be very important for the future of this region and for the future of New York State. We're also bringing together in the future all of our computer science and computer programming and information systems together. We hope to have a center for computer programming and information systems here on campus, which we believe will be a growth field in the future. And we continue to add degrees in the healthcare field, gerontology being just among the latest. The other step that we've taken, and our academics deserve the credit for this, is we've added to our curriculum about 12 micro-credentials. For those of you who aren't aware, I know people in education have their own language, like so many other fields. Micro-credentials are a short series of courses, perhaps 24 credits rather than 60 credits or 120 credits, where the student develops or demonstrates a significant proficiency in a field. That could be data analytics, that could be in renewable energy, that could be and will be in the future here in human resources. We have also added and begun to enroll this semester a cannabis production and management certificate that has been approved by the State University of New York system. I know the topic itself comes with some controversy. We believe that this will be an industry, at least in the downstate area, that will be of some significance in the future. And we're hoping to partner with other institutions, including organized labor. And we were in regular conversation with Queens College about that kind of programming. So we have, as Julie mentioned, experienced some growth in enrollment in recent years, far beyond what many institutions have been able to capture. We're fortunate with that, but I think we have a combination of place, price, and program. And I remind people of that have served us very well. Very centrally located here on Long Island, a program mix that is successful for a student population that is overwhelmingly from Long Island, and State University of New York tuition. Before we began this program this morning, we had a brief conversation about college costs and about student debt. And I want to make a broad point about that, maybe more than one, and then some focus points. It is imperative that students and their families, or whoever is working with them, guidance counselors and other, be very cognizant of the value propositions that are out there, whether they're looking at independent private colleges and universities, whether they're looking at SUNY schools, whether they're looking at CUNY schools. There is no substitute for being a savvy shopper along these lines. I will repeat over and over again to any audience that will listen that the returns to a college degree are enormous. It does not absolve anybody from looking very carefully at what it is they're purchasing when they begin to make an investment in a college education. So I'm going to say something that probably will surprise many of you. Over the last couple of years here at Farmingdale, as a result of money that's come to higher education through COVID funding from the federal government, we have actually reduced the average total cost of attendance over the last couple of years. We refunded a significant number of fees. We used CARES funding to provide financial aid to literally thousands of our students here. And though we don't necessarily run out all the time and talk about this, in fact, the return to the Farmingdale degree is probably continuing to grow because we've been able over the past couple of years to use that COVID funding to restrain the costs to students. There are many, many great values out there, public and private, in higher education. Sometimes students may need to adjust their expectations a bit along those lines. And should be asking themselves about what their borrowing will get them. But there are many places in which, between the aid an institution will offer and what they may be able to gain in the state of New York through the tuition assistance program, through federal Pell Awards, through the Excelsior Scholarship, many students may be able to attend colleges and universities with a minimal out-of-pocket expense if they're savvy about how they go about doing it. But I also want to talk about the return on investment, not just broadly at the regional or national level. Here at Farmingdale, we know through New York State Department of Labor data and through State University of New York data that our graduates command among the highest salaries of any SUNY graduates at 3, 5, and 7 years after graduation. When we deliver programs in the healthcare fields, in the engineering technology fields, and some others, we are graduating students who are able to command significant wages and salaries in the field of their choosing. And we're very proud of that. And as I had said prior to us beginning the program, 55% of the baccalaureate graduates of Farmingdale State College in recent years have left the college without any student loan debt that we are familiar with in terms of processing here. We're very proud of that. There is a national conversation about the costs of higher education. There's a national conversation about the returns to higher education. Very, very legitimate topics. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that everybody needs a college degree. I do not necessarily believe that. What I am going to tell you is that everybody needs an education. That may be an education that involves a higher level of near-term career training than other places, but everybody needs that as we progress into the future. It may not be a college degree that's the credential of choice. It could be one of our micro credentials. It could be a workforce development program through which students develop aptitudes or things along those lines. But to lack a formal education and some preparation, I think, would be negligent. So I honestly think that the conversation about college costs really has not focused on some very important factors, that there are so many places that are actively engaged in trying to recruit students and provide them great value for what they offer. That across higher education, colleges and universities, and certainly we consider ourselves a leader in this, are working to provide applied learning experiences for students in many settings. A four-year graduate at Farmingdale must complete and apply an approved applied learning experience before they're certified for graduation. That could be an internship, that could be work experience, that could be a capstone project, that could be a course in which they demonstrate their knowledge and skills here on campus. We do have a mechanism for approving that. That could be working through our Nexus Center for Applied Learning and Career Development for a placement. But we believe we are preparing students who are ready to go on, earn graduate degrees if they choose, ready to go on to successful careers if they choose to do that. That has affected the share of what we do on campus via remote learning. For reasons we're all too familiar with, we did move almost entirely to remote during some parts of COVID. We did keep some programs in the biological sciences, in nursing, some degree in dental hygiene, in aeronautical sciences, with a significant face-to-face component, but the majority of our sections were remote. We are not an online university. We are not a remote learning institution in the SUNY system. We will continue to deliver programs of strength in an online setting, but because we're so focused on applied learning, it will still be the case that the corpus of most degrees will be delivered here on our Farmingdale State College campus or through some applied learning experience that a student is getting in conjunction with us here in Farmingdale. I believe higher education did, and public education, under extremely difficult circumstances, did a very good job in pivoting. If someone had predicted to me in February of 20 that we would have the level of success and satisfaction that we did, I would have been skeptical. But we did constantly survey our students and faculty, and there was general satisfaction with the remote experience we were able to provide. It is not preferred to the high contact, high touch, on-campus experience that Farmingdale and many other universities and colleges are known for. So I don't expect COVID will lead us to do more in the area of remote education. We were expecting to do that anyway. I think we will be judicious about what we do in that area and continue to try to make investments to upgrade our facilities here on campus along those lines. Maybe, Julie, I should stop in that and see if there are questions or if there are topics that you want me to jump into. I don't just want to be a talking head in this, and I want to be sure I'm addressing the topics that come up. We were conversing earlier about the brain drain on Long Island, and I'm happy to address that. That is more than a Long Island issue, and we have had great success in that space. More than 90% of our graduates are employed or in graduate school within 6 months of leaving Farmingdale. About 3/4 of them stay on Long Island or New York metro area, but it is a big issue and I'm happy to discuss it. And I just saw something pop up in the chat.
Yeah, so before we go to,
I think you're frozen, Julie.
Yeah, her connection may
she's
have just
frozen.
dropped as she started to ask a question.
So John, I have one quickly, just in terms of what you were mentioning earlier about the possible ways to invest in education and what your opinion is on that. If you could speak a little bit about that.
Invest in what ways?
Investing in the sense that we were talking about, we were discussing
Right.
the Buy Back Better
Yep.
plan
Okay.
and the various approaches to how to utilize the most effective way
Great.
for government to start investing again in education.
Got it. Thanks, Lynn. So before we came on with this program, we'd had a bit of a conversation about the concept of free community college, or 2 years of support for students who go to community college. And I was asked my view on that. And I will be very forthright and tell you that I am adamantly against that. And I'm against it for a number of reasons. Really, it favors one sector of higher education over others, and it will almost undoubtedly drive students to two-year institutions or community colleges that might be better served at a baccalaureate institution, only over the matter of price. If we want to address college affordability, I would suggest there are better ways to do that than simply addressing one particular sector of higher education. I would say whether we expand the Pell benefits or look at other ways to support students who are moving on to higher education, those would be better and less apt to support a single sector of higher education. Also, when we make things free, or at least tuition free, it tends to attract people that might be better advised to wait a year or two before heading to college. Community colleges have relatively low graduation rates. That's to be expected. Most of them are open admissions. They're working very diligently with students who might not be as well as prepared as we would like. And we should not expect them to have the same retention and graduation rates. But to put more money behind that without thinking about how we can move graduation rates to higher level, I think is not the best investment that we could make under those circumstances.
Julie, you're back.
yes, I apologize, computer problems, but luckily I have a backup phone. So anyway, I really appreciate all that John shared. One of the things that I don't know when I dropped, but really just a mention of the applied learning focus that I think really is kind of historically where Farmingdale came from. And I know they've expanded beyond that. But, one of the things that I've heard in many LIMBA meetings, and we certainly hear from business and industry, which, LIMBA is a business association, is the fact that they are receiving workers, or the workers that they're receiving are not necessarily prepared in the way that businesses on Long Island need for them to be prepared. We have that conversation, and our business partnerships and our career and technical education programs, are listening to those conversations. Of course, there's very often a bridge between us and work, which is places like Farmingdale and community colleges. So, John, I know you spoke to a lot of the programs that you've developed. I don't know if you're hearing the same thing from business and industry and how you're addressing those particular concerns.
It's a great question, Julie, and it's one that comes up. I will say that at Farmingdale, it comes up less frequently than I hear in other settings. And some of the reason for that actually has to do with our student population. So about 70% of the full-time students at Farmingdale State College are actually working while they're studying for a 4-year degree here. That's a very high percentage compared to the state as a whole, and particularly very high percentage for 4-year institutions. So we do often hear from employers that when they hire a graduate, our students know how to work. That may not be the byproduct of the Farmingdale experience. I want to give the students credit here. If they're working while they're studying, they're learning something about time management, about responsibility, about being able to balance and so forth. And so we get very good, really encouraging feedback from many employers. I will tell you that there are a number of employers nearby here who consider a Farmingdale graduate a student of choice from them because we have programs that align with what some of those businesses are doing. I can tell you that in the healthcare fields, testing is not the be all end all, but in dental hygiene, in medical laboratory science, in our registered nursing program, over the past 3 semesters, each of those programs at least once has had a 100% pass rate on a certification or licensure examination. In other words, every student from the program who took the exam actually passed it and was licensed or certified. So we do hear that at times. Our programs in the health sciences, in business, in the engineering fields tend to be focused on at least the foundational knowledge or skills. For as long as there have been educational institutions, there have been employers complaining that they didn't fully prepare the students that they need for work. And I think we need to keep that perspective in mind as well. So it does vary. You know, I have a friend who works for a General Electric affiliate, and he had often said to me that he would rather have a ceramics engineering student from Alfred State than from RPI, because the Alfred student had probably done more applied work in her or his academic career than perhaps an RPI student did. Now, the upside of the RPI degree, no one should doubt, but it's interesting that in the near term, he was really focused on what a student can do when he hired him or her.
Yeah, I have similar feedback from a friend of mine who's a professor at Stony Brook in the computing department, and he bemoans the fact that many of the students literally can't write a paragraph. And, you know, algorithms are only, I'm a software engineer, algorithms are only part of what you need to do in this job.
I do think broadly, we somewhat neglect those kinds of soft skills. Really, to advance, to be able to write a good, coherent paragraph, to explain oneself clearly, and so forth, is vital. And we do have a writing across the curriculum initiative here. I can't tell you that it pays great dividends along the lines that you're describing, Frank, but we do recognize, and many places do, the importance of being able to do that.
So Ken Greenberg has a question, and I've asked him to unmute. And
Sure,
like
thanks so much. And thank you, Dr. Nader, for taking the time. We hear a lot about critical race theory and the issue of where universities always used to be that great place where divergent ideas could come together. You know, it's been kind of taken over, I can't say for Farmingdale, hopefully not, by what would be called progressives, but leaning towards Marxism. And there's a big BDS movement, boycott, divestiture, and sanction going on campuses. I wonder if you could talk about how Farmingdale approaches all these issues and what you're trying to accomplish there. Thank you.
So I think when we read about these things in the press or hear them in the media, they tend to paint with a very broad brush. And I will not say, Ken, that these things are not going on. And I read about an instance at MIT this week that was very disconcerting to me personally, with a scientist whose work is on climate change, but may not share other people's views on affirmative action, and was essentially disinvited from speaking about climate change, which I think is frankly unconscionable. I don't know that I need to say anything more than that. I do not believe, however, that some of the controversies that we read and hear about have permeated colleges and universities to the extent that the media coverage might convey. There are pockets on nearly every campus in which this occurs. It has come up here, but not often, I have to say, in terms of censoring anyone or curricula. We adopted 2+ years ago a student free speech policy here. We adopted a third-party free speech policy here. Campus is centrally located, and we do get requests periodically from various groups to use the campus. And we try to honor those within the realm of the policy that we adopted. Given that we're largely commuter, given that we are focused in the health sciences, engineering, business, and a number of other degrees, I would not expect and have not seen the debates around curriculum and cancel culture and things like that take shape here in the way that I see them on other campuses. That said, in visiting with my colleagues in SUNY and recently as last night, it really isn't top of mind for most of us. Most of us are focusing on trying to deliver quality programs for our students in a challenging environment. And we will always have a challenging environment, and it will be more so. There's certainly a lot of it going on. I think you would see it most, Ken, and maybe this is my stereotype and not the media's, at the more selective colleges and universities that have stronger arts and sciences cores. That is, these are at the core of the majors of those institutions, and largely residential campuses, than we will see in other settings. I think we're seeing it nearly everywhere, but at very, very different levels and very different degrees.
Lynn, I think you can unmute yourself if you had said you had an additional question.
Yeah, I was just curious, when I was prepping your bio, I want to hear a little bit about your Optimism program and what's that all about?
So that was driven by Ernie, focusing on.
Oh, really?
Because that was a theme we launched back in summer, fall of 2016 when I arrived. But I'll be happy to tell you the background on it. When I interviewed here in a broad meeting, kind of an open campus meeting, someone said, if you give a brief description of what faculty and staff on your current campus would say about you, what would it be? And I said, well, I had 3 faculty members who had a bumper sticker made up for me that says, powered by optimism. And it was on my old vehicle. And I kind of adopted that going forward, as did our marketing and communications people. I am an eternal optimist, almost by nature, and I try to see the silver linings of many things. I generally think if you don't approach your institution with that kind of view of the world, at least personally, I don't know that I could go forward day to day without it. I generally think that we find ways to make things better. And over the past 5+ years here at Farmingdale, I think we have made things better in the applied learning area, in adding new and very relevant programs that have already subscribed, some even exceeded our expectations, in trying to serve a very diverse population here on Long Island. And I mean diverse by the major fields of study that interest the students. I mean diverse by race and ethnicity. I mean diverse in that we have about 440 students who are legal permanent residents of the United States and whose families have come here. So I don't just necessarily mean ethnic and racial diversity. I mean programmatic diversity. I mean a range of perspectives coming to the institution. And we have made our facilities better. I think people in the state of New York don't fully recognize or appreciate that, at least in comparative terms, New York does better by its institutions of higher education than the vast majority of other states. I would always accept more. If anybody wants to convey that message, they're welcome to do so. But I think we are able to work very effectively with what we have and make the best use of resources. And I think we'll be able to continue to do that going forward. The future is cloudier than it was on the day I arrived. And I think we're going to have to be mindful of that in the enrollment environment.
Thank you.
So, John, I'd have to agree with you, having been born and raised on Long Island. If I look back, and I'm 61 years old, so I look back 40+ years, and think of just my graduating class and my friends and those that went to SUNY versus those that made a more expensive choice. You can't say across the board that everyone who made a more expensive choice did better in life. And so I think, as you said, we take that for granted here in New York, but the SUNY system is really something to be happy with and to be proud of. So I have a question also inspired by Ernie. My perennial question has been through the years over Limba is that historically Long Island had an economic engine, which was Grumman. And clearly that was the growth of the region economically, and then it disappeared. And we've not really been able to figure out what the replacement for that economic engine is. And I've asked that question decade after decade, and frankly, there's not been an answer. And Ernie came up with an interesting answer, and I'd like both of you, Julie as well, to answer to it. And that Ernie said, look at our little island and how many colleges and universities we have. Why shouldn't that be an economic engine? Why shouldn't Long Island turn around and advertise itself as a special place where students can come from all over the country to experience a unique and, what do you think of that idea?
Well, I think there's a truth to it, and sometimes I have a perspective that may be different from those of you who have spent many more years than I have on Long Island or grew up here. I came from a community that was a railroad town and had the world's largest roundhouse. There is no point in looking at the old railroad days and wonder if Oneonta is never going to be like that again. It is not. It will not happen. It has been what we refer to as eds and meds that have taken the place. And I think on a much larger and frankly more fortunate scale here on Long Island, that's been true. The medical fields and education have replaced manufacturing or other industries that were core in the past. I think we do have something of a science and technology corridor here on Long Island that spans the gamut from research institutions that turn out new product, new knowledge, new science, to institutions more like Farmingdale that can help to perfect, develop, implement those kinds of advances in a thoughtful way. And I think there's a very strong foundation along those lines. The other thing I would say to those of you who are longer term residents or natives to Long Island, I was very surprised when I got here that there is a vibrant, smaller manufacturing sector. And Long Island would be the envy of the rest of the state if it weren't for two rivers dividing it and people not actually knowing that. There is, and I travel around to places that employ our students, there is a pretty robust manufacturing sector here. They will never employ the large numbers of people that manufactories in the place did. We're talking about highly skilled, knowledgeable labor on the shop floor in many instances. But there is a vibrant sector, and much of it revolves around those scientific advances and those institutions that turn out graduates along those same lines.
So actually, Frank, I'm so glad that you included me in this question. One of the things that I do in addition to my role as Chief Operating Officer here is research on public education for a number of groups on Long Island. And in fact, there are many, and I am not born and bred on Long Island, but I have been here for the bulk of my professional career. So, I was born and raised upstate and then came down here 33 years ago. But there are many people who come to Long Island for the K-12 education that exists here and are in fact willing to stay and pay the price to raise their children here. The outcomes of the school districts on Long Island in the way of, successful, highly educated, well-rounded. It's not just about academics, it's academics and sports and the arts, and students who then go off to institutions of higher education or stay, at many of the institutions that exist here on Long Island is in fact, already an economic engine, because just like it takes staff and faculty to run or to, help institutes of higher education run, is the same for the K-12 world. Several years ago, we actually did a study on, what is the economic impact of the, hundreds of thousands of educators that it takes, in K-12 schools, and, the salaries that they earn, and how they turn that around in the businesses and the things that they buy and the homes that they buy. And so I think the ongoing conversation about the pathway and partnership, and how do we make sure that we're providing for students, what they need to provide for Long Island, what it needs, I think is an important conversation to continue to move forward. Conversations that happen at LIMBA, of course, about affordable housing, because I think that's a piece of it. We do have, highly educated folks who it's just, young people who it is less of a challenge for them to go someplace else and take their skills with them from a just getting started, economic point of view. But I thank you for that question.
So Glenn Gershner has a question. Glenn, I'm asking you to unmute now, or allowing you to unmute, please. There you go. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Frank. My name is Glenn Gershner. I'm the Dean of the Collins College of Professional Studies at St. John's in Queens. My colleague Bob Barone told me about this group, and I'm glad I showed up. And full disclosure, I grew up in Mineola. I went to Wheatley High School. I have my undergraduate degree from St. John's and a graduate degree from Hofstra. So Long Island is where I've lived my entire life. I just wanted to comment, Ken, you made that comment about critical race theory infiltrating campuses, and Dr. Nader, I heard your response. I think living in New York, let's face it, most of our college campuses are quite liberal, and that's what it is. And I'm sure Dr. Nader would agree with me. However, if you move outside of New York, you go to the Midwest and the South, the demagoguery is coming from the right. So this is really not, I don't think this is a right or left problem. I think this is a free speech problem. And what I see is, there's that old saying, everybody's in favor of free speech until you say something I don't agree with, right? Then you don't want free speech. So I think this is a real problem that we're dealing with here. Some faculty are afraid to talk about controversial issues because they feel that they literally may get canceled. And, the purpose, I've been a professor for 33 years. Our job in the classroom is to open the minds of our students, not close them. And I'm afraid that the current environment, whether it's coming from the right or the left, is creating, we're not getting that full discussion and free speech in our classrooms that our students need. So I just wanted to make that comment, and I'll follow up with Dr. Nader. Is you with me on this? Is this what you see at Farmingdale? Because this is what I see here at St. John's.
I'm sorry, I interrupt that part. Pardon me, Glenn. I'm completely with you on that. And I used the phrase, and I got some blowback on it at a SUNY meeting, that I'm close to a free speech absolutist. And I heard about using that phrase, but I'm going to use it again. I'm pretty close to a free speech absolutist. You may have opinions that offend me, and I may very well have those that offend you. But if we're not willing to hear and examine and listen, it's not a slippery slope. It's a downhill slide in a big hurry.
But clearly and especially I think our media has blurred the line between opinion and fact.
Yeah.
And that's where we really need to have our younger people, K through 12 and beyond, understand that distinction. Look for fact, look for background, look for legitimate quotes that support these things. That's what we're not seeing. When
I taught, I used to say to my students, I don't care what you think. I care that you think. And it doesn't need to be my opinion. And frankly, an 18 to 21-year-old's opinion doesn't need to mesh with mine. It's not going to damage my ego at that point of the game. That I was much more interested that they examine and think on their own than share whatever it is that I might have to say or whatever my opinion was on a topic. I do think it comes up with such frequency now that it is an important topic. And I think the way, Glenn, thank you for expressing that, was very articulate.
So Cindy, I'm going to ask you to unmute. I see you just said that you had a comment.
Good morning. I'm from Brookhaven Labs, Office of Educational Programs. I work for Ken White. And My comment, Dr. Nader, is that I've recently started working directly with your Nexus program.
Okay.
And I am so honored and excited to work with such a great group of people. And we are really honing in on developing the workforce development from K-12 through the university level, and trying to entice these graduates to stay on the island and work at the lab, because we see a huge deficit in the very near future of engineers and technicians, and really trying to retain that workforce. Your Nexus program is amazing. Your staff is phenomenal, and I'm really excited to continue this relationship with them. And I just wanted to introduce myself and let you know that.
Thank you very much. I just full disclosure, I didn't pay anything, right, Cindy? Entirely.
Not a thing. And I'm also a parent on the island that has a son who graduated high school here, went to Suffolk for 2 years, and now is breaking the bank because he decided to go to San Antonio, Texas, because he wanted to get off of the island and experience that. So I've got a little bit of everything going on here.
So our Nexus Center has been a huge success. And actually yesterday, and this will build, Cindy, on what you were saying, the Nexus Center hosted a substantial meeting with the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department so that we in academia, where we have multiple criminal justice related programs, as we do at Farmingdale, could understand how wide and varied the career opportunities in that field are. It's not corrections officer, police officer, road patrol, those kinds of things. What police departments that are forward looking, and Suffolk is, are doing in data analytics, in getting people out of incarceration, in working with families to try to repair where things can be repaired and give a new start to someone, was pretty impressive. And I'm hoping things will take off there as well.
Thank you, Cindy, for that comment. But John, can you explain the Nexus Center? I'm sorry if you mentioned it earlier and I wasn't paying close
I
attention.
just touched on it, Frank. Our Nexus Center is what we call the Nexus Center for Applied Learning and Career Development. So it brings together opportunities to work with organizations or businesses in applied learning, often, but not entirely, internships and those types of opportunities, as well as helping to place students as they're concluding their academic career here in Farmingdale. It's not a traditional college career office in the way that many places have, and that probably some of us are familiar with. I'm going to go out and say that much of what Nexus does is actually more focused on the applied learning, the internship, the externship. We even have some funding for students so that if they accept an internship that's unpaid and they're of limited means, we can help to support that as well. And we've had great success in working with a number of organizations and businesses here on Long Island, thanks to the work of Rena Varghese and others over at Nexus.
Great. You know, one of the things we've heard again and again from leaders in construction and other labor-based industries is that the concept of apprenticeship served this country well for centuries and centuries, and then it sort of disappeared. And we need to find a way back to that kind of gradual training from, you know, I think then what you say speaks to that, more of a dovetail.
Well, I'm going to go back to where I started early on, that I will always advocate for, and if I can, I need to get out of this, the value of college and university degrees. They pay off. If you're only interested in the financial return, they pay off very, very handsomely on average. But it is the case that everybody needs an education, even if they don't necessarily need to possess a college degree.
You know, actually, I was going to ask a follow-up of that exact statement that you made. Everyone needs an education. So I'm thinking in my head past 12th grade when you say that. Is that what you mean?
I do, yes. It can certainly come, there are some very high-end BOCES programs that are available. I actually upstate worked with a couple along those lines. There are places in the United States and others that actually do apprenticeship work with students while they're still in a high school setting and things of that sort. And those opportunities are out there.
So,
Barone, I'm sorry, I had a question. Cindy, Julie, go ahead.
so just, well, let's let Bob go. And then actually I thought with our last couple of minutes, maybe I just would ask John to reflect on. You spoke a little bit about some of your shifts during COVID, but I'd like to know if there's any good lessons learned that you think you're going to carry forward that maybe you hadn't thought of before. But did Bob had a question?
Well,
comment?
I've pressed the button here and we're waiting for him to unmute. I can go ahead and read it because he did type it in. Bloomfield College in New Jersey is seeking a partner due to financial distress. Many universities are experiencing financial distress because of demographic shifts, COVID, etc. On Long Island, we experienced Dowling and Briarcliff. Good point. Should college sustainability become a college characteristic to investigate when searching for a college? It's a shame to graduate from a college which has closed. And that's a very good point. Any thoughts or comments on this?
Honestly, very few. I think it goes back to where I started about the exploration that students and their families do. And I know it's not equally easy for everyone to do it, but one would want to know about the financial viability of the institution and whether or not, particularly private colleges, can sustain the discount rate that they may be offering. That said, it's tragic when it occurs and it diminishes the value of the degree. Very few colleges and universities close. We've seen a smattering of that. We've seen, there was talk in the earliest days of COVID, and this might segue to Julie's point, about more college and university closures. There have been very few of those. You do want to know that a college has the financial ability to deliver the experience you're looking for. You absolutely want to know that.
I came across a term in the last week or two. I read this book that's on the New York Times list now about Amazon called Fulfilled. And the term was, we're in a winner take all economy.
Yep.
And I think it really nails it. And I think, and then coincidentally, or maybe not, I'm reading this book about the Vanderbilts now, and it's leading me to think about the Gilded Age and the value of endowments. And that when you really look at what we expected to happen in our university system, it was based on endowments.
Mm-hmm.
And Stanford's going to continue to do just fine. Thank you. But there will be private schools in that middle area that don't have these large endowment capabilities in the future. I think we're going to see that.
Yep. I think
Right.
Lutz chimed in, but I want to just, Julie raised an interesting question, and I don't know whether this is going to be a surprising answer or not. I mentioned before, I was very impressed. It certainly exceeded my expectations about the ability of the college and other colleges to transition during COVID. I think what's coming out of it, and I believe we need to get back to, was the ability of people who are not student-facing to work remotely. It was driven of necessity, but I think it worked better than any of us thought here.
Yeah.
And I think that may help us contain some costs, recruit staff down the line who don't have to drive 5 days a week.
Yeah, we've heard that from other college leaders that the cost will be contained thanks to this
The
change.
state and the university have kind of constrained what we can do in that space, but we are a space constrained institution. There are colleges with worse problems than that. And it's something that I very much want us to take a look at. We have the technology that we need. I think we need good policy around it and need to think very clearly about what offices best lend themselves. The other thing it allows a place like Farmingdale to do, and many other campuses, is extend your business day. So maybe I work in the registrar's office 11 to 7, and students can do what they need via phone or some other medium later in the day if they're working or if they're parents or something along those
In my day, professors had visitor hours, office hours that were like 1 hour a week. Yeah. So Glenn wanted to chime in on endowments.
Yeah, I know we're kind of running out of time, but I'm of the opinion still that small private universities that are tuition driven are really in trouble. because, obviously public universities, it's distasteful, but you can always go to the legislature and they have the ability to keep the school afloat. It's not a state secret. St. John's, we've dipped into our endowment now each of the last 2 years to make ends meet. Thank goodness we have certainly not of the scale of Stanford or Harvard, but we have a reasonably large endowment. The private schools that have an endowment of $1, $2, $3 million and are tuition driven, if their enrollment drops by 15%, they're finished.
Yeah.
So I think there will be a shaking out, and not necessarily COVID related. And this I'll piggyback on what you just said, John, about expanding the footprint of the university. We compete with Arizona State that has 70,000 students in their online program. So we as college administrators have to rethink what we're doing. We can't, and I'm sure that Dr. Nader will agree with me, faculty aren't like the most people accepting of change, let's put it that way, that it's hard to get them to change their paradigms. And we have to start thinking differently about what we're doing.
So I'm going to, Glenn, reinforce your broader point with 2 anecdotes, which would irk some people here, but I have said this publicly. When I arrived, I said, I just want to convey this message to everybody. Everyone loves innovation and nobody likes change. And you can't have it both ways. It's just the way you express the term. The other thing I said, although I had a college president joke to go along with it, is how many faculty members does it take to change a light bulb? The answer is, who said anything about change? There is that element, and I think it's hard to cut through. I was the same way as a faculty member. I knew far more about running a college when I was a faculty member than I do as a college president, I assure you. I can't believe how much I knew when I was a 30-year-old faculty member compared to today in terms of the way college should be run. It is hard to cut through that and to have people see. And I say to people here on campus, I know you hear me talk a lot about enrollment and you may be tired of it, and I understand that. But nothing happens here without significant enrollment. If our endowment were 8 times what it is now, it could not throw off enough income to allow us to be a vibrant college if we had a 25-33% drop in enrollment. There's just not enough money there from endowments, even the publics that have very strong ones. Certainly I would, Stanford and MIT and Harvard, they're not private, or they're not publics, but you get the idea.
So Julie, I am going to give you a moment to wrap up, but I
Yep.
do want to mention that we did have sponsors for this this meeting, and we usually do it at the top of the meeting. Our Recycling, Lewis Jones, and Covanta, Construction Trades, AFL-CIO, and National Grid. And we thank our sponsors, as always, allow us to continue to bring meetings like this with Long Island leaders. So yes, if you could wrap us up, Julie, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So really just thanks to Dr. John Nader for an interesting conversation and for the work that you've done and the partnerships that you've created already, and all of that with recent rotator cuff surgery and a vocal cord issue. So, and thanks as always for Limba for creating this space for us to come together and learn and listen and figure out how to do things better. So have a wonderful day, everybody.
And thanks. And just to let everyone know that the next date is currently a issues roundtable, which we have a couple times a year, and allow people to just bring current events and other thoughts to the table. And we're looking forward to that meeting on November 5th at the same time. Thanks, everybody, and be well, and we'll see you soon. Thanks again.
Yes, be safe. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you.